So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first in our spring series of enterprise webinars, creating a successful reward strategy to support your recruitment and retention goals. My name is Esther Carter. I'm a partner at Moore Kingston Smith and very pleased to be hosting this morning. And over the coming weeks, you can listen to lots more topics, such as a 4-day working week that we're going to cover in March. And details are always available on our website of forthcoming webinars, and obviously you'll be sent invitations out. Please do let us know if there are any particular topics that you would like to hear covered. We're always welcome to suggestions. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with who we are. There's lots of regular names on the attendee list. However, for those of you who aren't quite so familiar with who we are, Moore Kingston Smith is a top 15 UK audit, tax and advisory firm. We work with businesses across all different sectors, as well as not-for-profit and private clients. We're also part of More Global, which is an international network with a presence in over 100 countries, so very well placed to help our clients on their international journeys. So today we're talking about employee reward strategies, and this topic has probably never been so important with all the disruption in the labour market that we've seen over the last couple of years, and now a skills shortage combined with wage inflation and cost of living crisis. And for most businesses, really, your employees are your main assets, so making sure that you incentivise them and reward them in the appropriate ways to make sure that you keep the right employees and people is absolutely vital and should form a part of your talent retention and recruitment strategy. And determining the right way to incentivise employees, of course, is not always easy, as different employees have different motivations and desires and expectations. So it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all, but it is possible to create an overarching strategy that works for your whole organisation. Fortunately, we have some experts here today to talk about this. I shan't be talking about it. So we are going to hear from Sam Gee. Welcome, Sam. She's director at Verdita Consulting, which she founded in 2015. Sam is a reward specialist, both in-house and consulting, with HR leadership experience in generalist HR, resourcing and diversity fields. And at KPMG, she was head of performance and reward and led significant cultural change and employee engagement programs. Her career also includes over 7 years in consulting, where she partnered with clients across many different sectors, including charities and not-for-profit organisations. Welcome. Our second speaker is Dinah Patmore, Strategic HR Partner at Moore Kingston Smith HR Consultancy. Dinah has wide-ranging experience working with business owners, leaders across the SME, large corporation and various industries, including private and not-for-profit sectors. She works with business leaders to help shape their people strategy and delivers on the priorities that will enhance the employee experience and business performance. So before we kick off with some questions, then a little bit of housekeeping. Please do ask questions. It's much more interesting if you ask questions that we can answer that are tailored to your business. Do pop them in the Q&A function. It's much easier to keep track of them there. And I will try and intersperse them to Sam and Dinah as we go. This webinar is being recorded, so please do share it with any of your peers who are unable to make it today or anyone who you think might be interested. It will be available on our website. And also there will be a very short feedback form at the end. It's super helpful, so please do spend the 30 seconds or so filling that out, because it helps us to shape future webinars. So I think we're going to kick off with a few questions for Sam then. So Sam, I mean, we talk about reward strategies a lot, don't we? But what do we actually mean by reward strategy? What does it involve?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Esther, and thanks for the introduction. That was lovely. So a reward strategy for me is it's about articulating the future direction of pay and the wider deal for your organisation. It needs to kind of knit into what else is happening and what other goals you have throughout the organisation. So for example, if you're looking to create a coaching culture, what you don't want is an approach to reward that says, give everybody a rating on a forced distribution so we can pay the bonus. So it needs to align with all the other bits and pieces in the organisation. I think it's really helpful to write it down, to articulate it. So often we would go to clients and they say to us, oh, it's okay, we've got a reward strategy. We all know what the reward strategy is. And invariably, when we do the work with them and we start to explore it, there'll be differences in view across that leadership team. and also the chances of your employees being able to say what it is are quite slim. So I think it's good to articulate that. And from a practical perspective, we try and create what we call as a reward strategy on one slide. So we encourage clients to have one slide for a strategy. Perhaps there's one about principles. I know it's got to be underpinned by communication around why you've taken those decisions and the different roles that people play. But I think being able to say, here's the one slide, here it is, in a really clear and succinct way is just hugely helpful.
And I guess there are good reward strategies and bad reward strategies, aren't there? What makes the sort of secret ingredients of a good reward strategy?
Yeah. There's a few different things, isn't there? I mean, I think to be very bespoke is important. Reward strategy is one of the core things that we do as reward consultants, and they are always different. Even clients in the same sector, they will be quite different. And I think I would probably avoid some of those generic statements that I sometimes see, sort of fair pay to attract and retain our people. Don't mean anything unless you talk about what it is that means. A small point, but when we share a reward strategy, we try and talk about it from the employee's experience. So that one slide I talked about, we wouldn't be saying this is what the organization does to you. It will be saying this is what reward is around here, and written from the perspective of the employee. But most importantly, I think there's some areas I would look to see probably in most reward strategies. And the first one is a really clear articulation of what fair pay is. Means something different to different people. Is it about the person? Is it about the job? If it's about the job, is it about the market, or is it about the value of the job? Really unpicking exactly what fair pay means around here. Another thing I think I would expect to see in any good reward strategy is an idea of what you're trying to achieve when it comes to transparency and communication. And I think that's quite a game changer. So if I look, Gartner produced some research recently that said that less than a third of employees think their pay is fair. We also had some research updated recently from PayScale. So a few years back, PayScale produced some research that looked at employees' perceptions of pay compared to where their pay was in the market. And they've updated it recently, which is brilliant. And what they've said is 57% of people who are paid on market think they're underpaid. But this gets worse because 42% of those that are paid above market think they're underpaid. So I think a strategy has not got to be doing the right thing, but it needs to be spending as much effort on communicating that that's the right thing, so that what they're doing is appreciated. A couple more things. I'd expect to see something about the role of people managers. Pay is getting more complex. I think there's a role there in reward. And then I've talked quite a bit about pay, but I think the strategy is about what you do to take pay off the table, and then what you will do in your wider deal to really differentiate you. And the very best strategies, I think, are the ones that also have some higher level goals in them. Maybe that's about low pay, or it might be about pay gaps, but have some sort of bigger goals that you're trying to achieve.
What might some examples of those sort of goals look like?
Yeah. So if I think about some of the clients that we've worked with, so we had an organisation who could not afford to pay the living wage but wanted to get there. So they set their own living wage, which was part way between the regulatory living wage and the real living wage, and communicated that openly as their living wage, and talked about what they would do to get to the living wage, so that they shared that goal and their direction of travel. Quite often there'll be goals around addressing pay gaps, whether that's a gender, ethnicity, or a socioeconomic pay gap, and that leads to a number of different activities in your reward plan. We worked with a client that wanted to align reward to their strategic goals. This was a legal client, and they wanted to introduce a bonus to share their profit. And in consultation with them, we learned that their strategic plan was about their clients and their people and their communities. So what we did there is we put that in as a goal, and they aligned their bonus to some of the measures in their strategic plan, with the view that if you do the right thing when it comes to client, communities and people, the results will follow. But perhaps one of my favourite examples was something a CEO said to us once when we went to a meeting, a new business meeting, and he said, my goal is that what we pay people, we're happy to publish, that we will publish what we pay everybody. And he said, I don't want to publish pay today. It's a shame, because that's quite exciting from a reward professional when you hear a client say something as proactive as that. He said, I don't want to publish pay rates, but I do want to be in a position where if I chose to, I'd be really confident in all of the decisions that we've taken and how we would justify it. So I thought that was a nice goal to have as part of their strategy.
Somebody's asked, also you talked about transparency and communication. They've asked sort of, how would you go about communicating that? What level of, is it written? Is it face-to-face? Is it in a handbook? What frequency, what level of person would you be communicating that to?
I think it has to be multifaceted. I think it has to come from in a number of different ways. I would certainly share the strategy, and I would share why you've chosen that strategy and how you hope to achieve it. And I think there's a role for what you're doing to be shared from a strategic perspective, perhaps from leadership. There's a role to have reward shared in a way that can be discussed. Perhaps it's at team meetings, you might share the strategy and discuss it. So you've got a two-way process there. And perhaps it's about publishing pay ranges. Perhaps it's about communicating the wider deal on an annual basis. So your line managers are equipped with what they need to talk about the wider deal. But I think it is about doing it in many different ways to engage people on many different levels. But at the heart of this, you need that strategy really clear.
I like the quote about, not wanting to publish pay rates, but being in a position where you'd actually be really confident to defend them if you were to publish them, because actually publishing aside, you have to assume that people are going to share with other people what level of pay they're on. And you might get, Fred coming to you saying, well, Mary's on, £5,000 more than me. Why is that? So I think, it's important, isn't it, to be able to defend your position.
It is, and it's about making good decisions that you're confident in, that are supported by a framework, an enabling framework, and being proactive about sharing them. Because if you're the one sharing the messages, you're in control of the messages. If you as an organization are silent, those conversations will happen. They'll happen on social media, they'll happen by the coffee machine, and you can't pick up the things that might be wrong. You can't pick up the things that might need explaining. You're not in control of the conversation.
Somebody's asked, what format would you use to build a strategy?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah.
Do you mean, I wonder if they mean process, the process that we would go through.
I expect so, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, if you haven't got one, where do you start?
Where do you start?
I guess employ a professional like yourself is the
yeah. Well, what you don't do is you don't look at what your competitors are doing, unless you're looking at what they're doing in order to not do it and find what's going to make you unique. What we tend to do is we will identify a number of key questions that we think need to be answered, and that will be off the back of doing some research on the organisation and what the employee perspectives are. We would talk to the senior leaders individually, so that we can explore things with them, we can challenge some of their views, we can explain some things they might want to chat through with us, and hear what they've got to say. We then craft something that we think might be right. And in there, we might have some of the areas where there are different perspectives and they need exploring. And then we'll bring that group back together to discuss it and come up with something that everybody can buy into and say, yeah, that's the way forward.
Yeah. So we've got two other questions, which I think sort of tie nicely together, and actually I think link into the next question I was going to ask anyway. So one is around, do reward schemes have to involve money? Can other benefits be brought into play, like extra leave, healthcare acceptable? And the other was, what if you're struggling to pay the wages each month anyway? What other incentives are there? I mean, the question I was going to ask was about the current cost of living crisis and how that is affecting reward strategies. And I think non-financial or slightly less expensive financial rewards is part of the answer of that, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think I might have said it just now, I can't remember. One of the things we talk to clients about is taking pay off the table. What do you need to do to make it comfortable and understood so that you can move away from debating pay to a place where you can start to think about your wider deal? And perhaps that might be about new benefits, communication of benefits. It might be how you create a culture of growth. It might be how you create a sense of community. But it's those things that will differentiate you, and that's where the massive impact is. But you've got to put enough effort into the pay bit to stop that being a blocker of your activity. And we've seen a few different things happen, haven't we, as part of the cost of living crisis. So we've seen some good long-term stuff being done, particularly around financial well-being and improving how, the range or how we communicate benefits. Great stuff to help as you go forward. But we've also seen some ad hoc things happen, particularly around ad hoc bonuses and ad hoc pay increases. And that's where I think organisations are saying, oh my goodness, so what do we do next year? And, oh, have we disrupted our internal equity? And that doesn't quite fit with what we've said our reward strategy is. Where in our reward strategy does it say that we might do something like that, and why? So that is where a lot of organisations are saying we've got to rethink this reward strategy to make sure it's a bit more future-proof, and it has some logic in there that we can apply in really good times and really tough times to take us through. And some of the things that we're seeing are around perhaps having more agility, more flexibility when it comes to pay and pay decisions, sort of targeting the money where you may need it most, whether that's those on low pay, those with scarce skills. Maybe it's a particular department, maybe it's a particular level. We've also seen organisations, and this comes to the affordability point that you've made, perhaps looking at having variable pay schemes, so perhaps a profit share scheme, so that you pay it when you can afford it and you don't pay it when you can't. So there's a bit of protection there for the organisation, but an upside for the individuals. And also, one of the things that is quite often talked about when it comes to reward strategy, more so with the cost of living crisis, is if you have members of your workforce that are so close to the breadline that you get inflation at 10%, and it's a critical issue for them because they know they can no longer have a reasonable standard of living, what are you doing to move that floor up? And perhaps that might be about developing skills, or perhaps that might be about readjusting how you do your pay review and where you target your pay review pot. But I see that being an important part of many reward strategies right now.
But frequency of pay reviews, how often should that be?
I think that an annual pay review enables you to do it well. So you can take account of all of the information that you've got. Quite often benchmarking is updated once a year. Pay structures take a lot of effort. You update them once a year. You can have a look across teams and make sure you're making the right decision. You can look across departments. You can look at the hierarchy, make sure that the pay is right from many angles. You look at it from a diversity perspective as well. Make sure you're not making decisions that are disrupting some of that and making that worse. So I think a considered decision that's made well and communicated well takes a fair bit of time. So you may not want to do that more than once a year. You set your budget for the organisation once a year. Why not set your pay once a year? I think if you bring more agility in, more flexibility, the line manager should be able to make a pay decision that keeps that person at a reasonable level, given what they bring for the year. I accept that. It's been a weird couple of years, and it may be that some organisations have felt the need to review pay in the middle of the years and have to. But I see too many organisations just giving an across-the-board increase rather than doing pay well in that second review. And I would ask what part of their reward strategy that aligns to, because it's not about aligning with the market. It's not about looking at relativities within a team or across a function and getting it right. It's just a blanket response.
Yeah, because like you say, an awful lot of time and effort does need to go into pay reviews, and if you're doing it sort of twice a year,
yeah.
I guess it is easy just to default to the across the board pay increase.
Yeah,
whereas if you do it annually, like you say, a lot more effort and tailoring can go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Super. So Diana, I think moving to you, we talked a bit about benchmarking, sort of, looking specifically what can be done within the reward strategies. And somebody has asked, what are the best methods for salary benchmarking? So maybe just tell us a bit more about how benchmarking works generally.
Yeah. Thanks, Esther. Yeah. So benchmarking is something that I definitely recommend all employers do, excuse me, as part of a basic part of your reward strategy. It's obviously outward looking to the market, so comparing what your business pays your employees compared to your competitors and the wider market. And it's important to decide in advance what data is relevant to compare yourself to. So very much depending on the job roles as well. So an example that I often refer back to is a manufacturing client of ours who was historically benchmarking their factory operatives against other factories in the area. And there was actually an Aldi supermarket just up the road, which was offering a much more attractive package. So they were losing people who could and would rather work for a supermarket. So, we had to look at the wider picture and look at, okay, this data is also important to consider in the overall benchmarking exercise. It's also really important to use good quality data. We usually recommend using up-to-date salary survey data that's available out there that you can buy. We have access to various salary survey data as well that we use when we're undertaking it for clients, alongside live job data as well, which is really important because the live job data gives you kind of all the little nuances that you might not get from just the salary survey data on its own, especially where there's kind of little differences in the market going on currently at the moment. Then you'll be able to factor that in when you're considering your overall position in the market and where you want to be. And as Sam has already mentioned, the reason why benchmarking is actually really important, especially at the moment, is because even when people are being paid at market rate or above, as you've already said, Sam, they have a tendency to think that they're not being. So, the communication piece is so important. Making sure that people know how their pay compares to the market is actually really high priority in today's market, I think. And it's not just pay benchmarking either. We've definitely seen an increase in demand for family-friendly policy benchmarking. So, for example, maternity pay and leave. What are other organisations doing in that field, in that area? And the trend is actually to increase that at the moment. There's a real trend for that. So, depending on your employee demographic, if you've got people with relevant, age, etc., it's definitely worth looking at your family-friendly offering and making sure that you're competitive in that arena as well, because we've seen a trend in requests for that.
Somebody's asked, how do you consider local market factors? Some organisations in their area in Cambridge have started to look at London weighting factors.
Yeah, I mean, it's all worth obviously putting into the mix and considering. London, if you're in Cambridge, though, I wouldn't have thought that you would necessarily include London weighting in your considerations for benchmarking for the Cambridge area. But it just depends, I guess, what the roles are, because if the roles are roles where you can work remotely and you can work from pretty much anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, then you might think, okay, well, it is relevant then to consider London weighting. So as with anything, it's really hard to sort of say, yeah, definitely consider London waiting or don't. It really does depend on the roles that you're looking at, and the type of business that you've got there. But yeah, hopefully that's helped to answer that question.
So I was just reading a very long question. Salaries appear to have become very distorted during the COVID years. I've seen 40 to 50% uplifts for some job roles. Do those jumps stay fixed now? Could benchmarking be seriously misleading until things start to settle down again? Or should we just be giving pay rises to match these changes that we've seen?
Yeah, again, it's all part of the overall kind of strategy that you would set this out at the start of when you're looking. But I think it definitely has skewed things. Obviously, we've seen salaries that are not usual in the marketplace, and that definitely has skewed things. And I know a lot of clients that I've spoken to have, as a result of recent times, decided that, you know, from now on they're not just going to keep raising salaries with inflation, in line with inflation, because they can't, one, and two, because, you know, it's just going to continue to skew everything. So they've decided to give those one-off bonuses to try and help people through the cost of living crisis, and that's essentially what they've been doing. But I do think that, yeah, it doesn't help. It does skew things, for sure.
Can I just say, we often talk about, I mean, having pay benchmarking is an absolute must, but it's just one part, isn't it, of that
Yeah.
decision. And it does weird things. It can jump all over the place. It can distort things, and it can not reflect what's really happening. So the Cambridge question, it might be that the skills in that sort of Cambridge, Oxford, sort of that triangle, that command a really high rate similar to London. So I think it's about, you get the market data, you look at where you are, and then you decide what you are going to do. And that's the art next to the science. And that's about interpreting it in a way that gives you a framework that you think is right for your business, that isn't slavishly following the data, which has all sorts of issues, doesn't it? An inherent bias from past years and decisions, but starts to say, this is what we're going to do in our organisation, because we believe it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. I often
it's not helpful, is it? Because it's not the answer.
But no, there isn't an answer, is there? That's why it's got to be bespoke, hasn't it? And you know, it's not a one size fits all, as you said at the beginning, Esther.
And I suppose evaluating the actual job that you're talking about is a big part of getting that right, isn't it? And making sure that, you know, they compare fairly and that there aren't any historical.
Yeah, exactly that. So that's
yeah,
I think that, you know, as well as salary benchmarking, which is obviously outward looking, you've got job evaluation, which is inward looking. So assessing pay between roles internally, and essentially you're putting a value on a specific job that you've got in your business. And yes, that can help you to develop your pay and grading structures, and help to counteract any equal pay claims and that kind of thing. We have done job evaluation for clients before where they historically haven't had much of a reward strategy per se, and now they're not sure their salaries are reflective of the value that the jobs that are being done, and they can really be useful, like you said, Esther, to help historical pay discrepancies between roles. They can also help with highlighting issues around job design, because quite often when we're doing job evaluation projects for clients, we're talking to job holders directly about what they're actually doing, and we will find out things, you know, around, okay, you know, I'm duplicating work, I've got frustrations around this and that in my role. So quite often when we're going back to clients about the value of jobs, we're also helping them out with kind of job design as well, which is a big part of, you know, attraction and retention, because we're helping the actual jobs be more beneficial and more rewarding for people.
When certainly in the sort of marcoms industry, when we're talking to clients about thinking what sort of rewards might be appropriate for which types of people, we use this, what we call this 4-box grid model, which I know is used in other industries as well. But I'm not sure it's something that everyone might be aware of or understand. Can you just tell us a bit more about what that looks like and what that involves?
Yeah, sure. So the 4-box grid can be useful to a certain extent to help segment the workforce, to help ascertain how to reward people. So the 4-box grid is essentially a performance and potential matrix. So people in the top right of the matrix will be high performers and high potential employees, and the bottom left are the complete opposite. So we've got low performance and low potential employees in the bottom left of the 4-box grid. So in terms
we call them the transfer list.
Yes, precisely. Yeah. So in terms of a reward, the strategy is usually to offer a reward that ties in the high performance, high potential employees to your business, in form of things like, share options, maybe EMI schemes. Whereas the high potential, low performers, so the top left as opposed to the top right, they need incentivizing to perform. So they've got the potential, but they need incentivizing to perform. So you might offer them some kind of long-term incentive plan linked to performance objectives, so that you've got the performance element hopefully a bit more covered. The key thing here really is to have a clear definition of what potential is for your particular business, because that's going to obviously vary as well across business. And yeah, overall though, the 4-box grid is a talent management tool. It's used across the board. It can really help to segment your workforce and help the reward strategy to a certain extent, definitely. But the way things are kind of moving in the world of work, it does kind of mean that employees are wanting more and more to be treated individually as individuals, have a more personalised employee experience. That's what we're seeing talked about all the time now. So yeah, that's
I think it's a balance.
Going.
It's a balance, isn't it, between treating everyone personally and trying to actually manage how you structure your rewards within a large organisation where you might have, hundreds of people to consider. So I mean, we talked a lot about treating people as individuals, but I mean, in practice, how easy or difficult is that, and how does that actually work?
Yeah, well, research in psychology does show us that kind of generic annual bonuses aren't necessarily that motivating. They become an expectation. They are more of what we might call a hygiene factor more than a motivator. So, it's by hygiene factor, I mean they won't cause satisfaction or motivation necessarily, but the absence of them or the getting them wrong will definitely cause dissatisfaction. So employees value personalised rewards more than just say their annual bonus, that are unexpected and timely, really. So giving line managers a reward or recognition budget can really help with this, can help that happen. Line managers obviously play such a big part in making employees feel valued, and in enhancing the employee experience overall. So if you give them a budget to reward them outside of the norm, outside of the normal cycle, they can ensure that the reward is timely. So employees aren't necessarily waiting to the end of the year for a bonus for that project that they did really well on, which they're going to be seeing as their entitlement anyway, because they get a bonus every year. And they can ensure that the reward is much more personalised and unexpected. Also, I think Sam mentioned this already, but having line managers understand how pay is determined overall, and be confident to have conversations about pay, because transparency goes such a long way to keeping employees from feeling dissatisfied. Again, it's not going to necessarily motivate them, but they've got, they will feel dissatisfied if you have a line manager who doesn't necessarily know how your pay is determined, doesn't necessarily know what the business's reward strategy is. All of that kind of thing, it can be extremely demotivating for people. But even if businesses don't want to give a reward budget to their line managers, maybe they think, oh God, that's a bit risky, or I don't know. There are obviously other ways of finding out how people want to be rewarded. We are often in, delivering focus groups and surveys and things like that to get much more useful insight into what expectations are, to a certain level, and that can all then be part of considerations when you're designing your reward strategy.
I mean, what other tools do businesses have at their disposal? I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about pay, but what other tools do we have to sort of attract and retain our workforce?
So like we said, so pay is obviously, like we say, a hygiene factor. So although it's very, very important, other aspects of employment have considerable influence on success in attracting and retaining. So the starting point really is to know what your employee value proposition is as a business. And we are often a fresh pair of eyes looking at that for our clients, helping businesses understand what is their employee value proposition, what makes them good to work for, where do they stand out in the market, and also equally to know where their gaps are as well, and knowing how you fare in terms of all the areas of kind of, onboarding, culture, career progression, line manager capability, all of that stuff. If you know how you fare in those areas as a business, and you're gaining a better understanding of how you're perceived as an employer, you are then in a much stronger position to be able to know how you're attracting and retaining people, and if you're not, how you can start attracting and retaining people. It's often, we speak to clients, leadership teams, and we talk to them about, okay, what's good about working for your business, and often what they come up with and the perception that they have is quite different to the reality and what employees feel. So there's a lot of benefit in having a fresh pair of eyes on it all, and also getting employees involved as much as possible. I'm always banging on about getting employees involved, but it is really important.
What are any other considerations that businesses should sort of take into account when sort of looking at their recruitment and retention goals?
I think the top of the list is still going to be flexibility and the decent work-life balance. That's something that, again, we've banged on about for ages, but it still remains the top thing that employees want, that candidates look for. And I don't think that's going to change in any time soon, really, to be honest with you. I think I've been reading a lot more about, I read that equality, diversity and inclusion budgets, a lot of businesses are planning to increase their budget for that specific area in the coming years. So it seems that might be an important area to think about as a business, to help attract people into your business and indeed retain them as well, and really just looking at your employment cycle as a whole against your employee demographic. So who have I got, who are my employees, what are all the elements of the employment cycle that they're going to, all the touch points, and just trying to make that employee experience more personal for them as much as you can without it becoming too onerous for you as a business.
Super. And then I think we've got one sort of final question for both of you, really. So $64 million question. What do you think is going to happen to pay over the coming months and year? Do you have a crystal ball?
Sam, you can go first.
I jump in. Yeah. It feels like this is the perfect storm, isn't it? Because of the high inflation and high interest rates and hard to fill vacancies, and so many people on, tens and thousands of people on strike. All of this says pay needs to move. But then businesses are cautious about the future. The government wants us to show some restraint. There's something pulling back pay. I like and it's a core document. One of the places I like to go is the CIPD Quarterly Labour Market Outlook, because they ask employers what they intend to spend on the pay review in the coming year, and they're saying 5%. And it's been 2% forever. It's been 2% since they started publishing this report, and now people are saying 5%. So I reckon that it might be around there. So it won't be at the 10%. 10.1% inflation rate. So it is a pay decrease in real terms, but I think it will be bigger than it has been typically over the past few years. So that's my thought.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing inflation reduce slowly.
Tiny bit. Yeah.
Slowly. So employers in some sectors may feel the pressure will reduce to continue to increase salaries as the cost of living crisis does look a little bit, hopefully, as though it may not be as severe as expected for some. However, there's still going to be those skills shortages out there in the coming months, and that's what makes the markets that much more unpredictable, as we'll probably continue to see unusually high salaries being offered for certain roles, where is the talent shortage. So the digital skills, leadership, communication skills, those kind of things. And however, as Sam has already mentioned as well, I think it's the lower income employees that who will continue to need the most help in the coming months. And as it's traditionally been the higher earners that receive a far broader range of benefits, I think there might be a bit of a trend to move to offering a wider range of benefits to supplement the salaries of those on lower incomes as well.
I think it has to be, doesn't it? I think there is this realization that we, in particular in some sectors, we cannot carry on giving the pay increases that we have recently, and it's got to be something else that differentiates you.
Well, thank you both so much. We are sort of pretty much bang on our 10:45 end time. So if anyone else does have any questions, I'm sure that Diana and Sam would be happy to take those offline if you wanted to send an email in. Thank you all for coming and listening. Remember, it has been recorded, so if you do want to share it with your peers or people who couldn't make it today, then please do so. Looking forward to seeing you hopefully at the 4-day working week webinar, which I'm very much looking forward to hearing about what's going to be saying about that in March. And please do fill out the feedback questionnaire. It's very short. Like I say, it's really helpful in helping to shape future webinars. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.